Hi everyone, and welcome to First Chapter Fridays with Miss Bitterly and Miss Nickerson. This is our third week of chapter books, so yay for that. This week I am going to be reading a book called Hoax for Hire. It is a newer book by Laura Martin. Okay, it's a realistic fiction book, however it's also very comedic. The back cover describes this as the Goonies meets the humor and heart of Gordon Corman. So if you really like Gordon Corman books, or if you love the movie The Goonies, this is be a great fit for you. I've loved it so far. I'm not quite done with it yet, but it definitely hooked me. So let's read on. Chapter 1. Should I be worried that I can't feel my toes? I asked as I shuffled my flipper-covered feet. I'd never had to pull off a hoax that involved water this late in the season before, and the murky Altamaha River was a new level of cold that I was pretty sure only polar bears could appreciate. Suck it up, Curtis said, yanking hard on the straps that held my air tank on my back as he finished the last of the safety checks. Everything looks good, he said. He came around to stand in front of me, his knee-high boots keeping his feet wonderfully dry and warm. He put a hand up to adjust my dive mask, and I slapped it away. Stop it, I said. I know how to put on a mask. Gramps gave me the same scuba lessons he gave you, and if I remember right, I was better at them, so stop acting like that. Like what? Curtis asked. Like an obnoxious know-it-all, I thought, but I just shook my head. There were some things you didn't say to your older brother when there wasn't an adult around to make sure you didn't get smeared. I stared past his smug face toward the churning river. The water was moving fast, probably due to a recent rain, and I wondered idly what camera lens would work the best in this hazy light. Of course, my camera wasn't here. It was never allowed at a hoax. Not since I'd gotten in trouble over the Loch Ness Monster pictures. I was here to work, not have fun, a point my dad would have made if he were here. Are you sure you don't want to trade me jobs? I asked Curtis. No way, he said and grinned. I like my toes. They happen to be one of my best features. You aren't funny, I said. Matter of opinion, Curtis said. When I continued to frown, he sighed and rolled his eyes. Grayson, knock it off. We've been over this. You've never organized eyewitnesses by yourself before, and we can't afford to mess up this job. You know that. Dad and Gramps know that. I'm sure even the real Altamaha knows that. He said with a jerk of his head toward the river. This whole hoax has a lot better shot of working if you're under the water and I'm on land doing the hard stuff. I sighed. He was right. I didn't like that he was right, but he was. I just wish that Dad hadn't double-booked us with the Loch Ness Monster sighting in Scotland and that Gramps hadn't gotten held up in the Congo. You and me both, Curtis said. For a second, his cocky demeanor slipped a little, and I caught a glimpse of the nerves he'd been hiding ever since our grandfather had called 2 days ago to tell us that we were going to have to do this one all on our own. It wasn't the first time Curtis and I had pulled off a hoax without Dad or Gramps, but it was the first time we'd had to do a sea monster hoax by ourselves. Those were always trickier. What with the scuba gear, the actual logistics of assembling a 20-foot monster and sinking it in the water without any unwanted eyewitnesses. And then timing the eyewitnesses' sightings you actually did want. Okay, so maybe Curtis's job on land wasn't easier, but I'd still trade him. I took a deep breath and released it through clenched teeth. Man, I hoped we didn't screw this up. I come from a long line of cryptid hunters, which is a fancy way of saying that my family is ridiculous and they managed to make it a career. A cryptid is, by definition, a creature that may or may not exist, like Bigfoot or the Chupacabra or the Loch Ness Monster. It's a thing that lives primarily in legend, eyewitnesses' accounts, and footprints in the mud, but nowhere else. Every McNeil, as far back as anyone can remember, has strapped on boots and gone out to hunt for the creatures that seem to live only in the tallest of tall tales. Most no one has ever heard of and will never hear of because they've never been discovered for a reason. They don't actually exist. My Scottish McNeil ancestors grew up in a village on the shores of the legendary Loch Ness, where stories of a sea monster have been told for hundreds of years. So I guess cryptid hunting seemed like a viable career option. It was a life filled with adventure, travel to exotic locations, unbelievable stories, and no paychecks. Floyd McNeil, I think he was my great uncle or something like that, is the one who figured out that if you couldn't catch the real thing, then faking it could bring in enough cash to fund the next exploration. Although, not to give him too much credit, the whole thing was completely by accident. He was hunting the Cadbrosaurus, or caddy, as the people of the British Columbia called the sea monster, supposedly living in Cadboro Bay in the 1930s. Caddy was allegedly as long as 70 feet, with flippers like those of a sea lion, a head like a horse, and a fan-shaped tail. It was also supposed to be able to swim wicked fast. Why Uncle Floyd thought he had a shot of catching something that big is beyond me, but he wasn't the only one trying to catch Caddy. Cryptid hunters and adventure seekers were flooding into the little town on the edge of Cadboro Bay, and good old Uncle Floyd was feeling a bit crowded. Apparently, the mayor of Cadboro was feeling the same way, because over one too many drinks, the men decided to fake a Caddy sighting 3 towns over. Uncle Floyd agreed to arrange and execute the hoax if the mayor would pay, and it worked. Everyone chased the red herring, and Uncle Floyd got a pocket full of cash. And so the hoaxes began, and the McNeils went from wackadoodle cryptid hunters to wackadoodle cryptid hunters with a side of fraud thrown in for good measure. For every real trip a McNeil made in search of a cryptid, they made 2 more to create a cryptid hoax. It was a win-win. They muddied the waters for the other cryptid hunters, successfully sending them on wild goose chases, while simultaneously funding their own hunts. They staged sightings, made footprints in mud, left hair samples, created odd sounds in the night. You name it, they did it. Barnum and Bailey bought their taxidermy Fiji mermaids, and 2-headed cows. Town mayors and officials slipped cash into my ancestors' pockets to create sightings that would attract tourists. Political figures seeking to disgrace their opponents hired them to stage UFO sightings and create crop circles in their opponents' yards. Husbands trying to discredit their ex-wives hired them. The list went on and on. My family had found a niche, albeit a criminal one, and we weren't the only ones. According to Gramps, there was another family somewhere out there doing the exact same thing we were. The Gerards. A fact that bugged him and Dad to no end. Anytime something cryptid-related hit the news, Gramps would watch the footage obsessively until he could determine if those blasted, ninny-headed flapjacks for brains Gerards were involved. Curtis and I always watched this performance with barely concealed grins. For a veteran hoaxer, Gramps sure worried a lot about a family located thousands of miles away in Germany. My dad was the first McNeil to dump the cryptid hunting part of the tradition completely and focus only on the hoaxing, a fact that disappointed Gramps more than he let on. Gramps was a true blue hunter, but he never passed up a good hoax, and he'd have given anything to be standing next to me in the freezing cold Altamaha River, which was kind of ironic since I'd have given anything to be anywhere else right now. Curtis checked his watch and nodded. "It's go time, don't screw up." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," I said before grabbing my regulator and jamming it between my teeth. "I'm serious," Curtis said. "We have a lot riding on this." I grunted at him as I sloughed through the river in my flippers, lifting my knees comically high in my best impression of a deranged duck until I was deep enough to submerge completely. I had a date to keep with the sea monster. That, my friends, is the end of chapter 1. So if you are interested in this hoax and to see if they pull it off, or to see if they actually do find a big sea monster, and kind of the whole story, please feel free to check this out from libraries. Go on Amazon and buy it. You'll notice this copy was an advanced reader's copy that I got about a month ago. I believe it is out for sale now, so check it out if you're interested. I hope you enjoyed this first chapter, and I hope to see you all next week. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you later. Bye, guys.